In this video, I'm going to use Revit Analytical tools to size an HVAC system. I'm going to create a new project and look for default mechanical template by hitting the Browse button. First, I need an architectural model. So under Insert, I will link a Revit file. In my Downloads folder, I have a sample retail store model that I previously modified a little bit. Under Manage tab, I will select Acquire Coordinates and click on the linked Revit file. Then I will go to Location, and here in the project address I will type Nashville, Tennessee, and then after selecting it, I will click OK. Also, when it comes to linked Revit files, it is very important for the purpose of our video to select and go to Edit Type and then check Room Bounding. Room bounding helps to identify spaces and critical information like volume, so I'm going to the ceiling floor plan to see how tall the ceilings are. It looks like I'm missing some ceilings, but actually they're not visible in my view. By typing VR on my keyboard, I can open the view range, and since this building has only one floor, and in the ceilings plan view I'm actually looking up, I need to set the depth to unlimited. Now I want to know how high the ceilings are. One way to know this is to use elevation tool. This ceiling is 15 feet. This other one is also 15 feet. Right here I have 8-foot ceilings, and a couple of rooms do not have ceilings at all, so I have 21 feet. Next step is to go to Analyze and select Spaces. Limit offset is the height of the space, and since it is 8, I will start with these smaller rooms right here. Offset can also be modified up here, and I will type 15 and then place these two largest spaces. Lastly, I can do 21 feet to place spaces in the rooms without recessed ceilings. The default name of spaces is not very meaningful, so I'm going up here and click on Space Naming. This will pull and match the room names from Arch model. As I can see, this area is called Sales. Spaces contain a lot of information, and when I select it, I can go to Properties panel and see all the information, and under Identity Data, I can see grayed out the room name and number set by architectural model, and above there is the actual name and number that I can edit. One other thing I need to do is to model a mass that matches the shape of the building. I'm going to name it Conceptual Mass and hit OK. I need to draw the exterior perimeter of the building. Work plane has to be set to level 1, and I want to make sure I draw on the work plane. I will start from this side, and I want to make sure I include just the exterior side of the mullions. I'm going to extend all the way to the left, and then I will offset to match exterior side of the walls represented by this thicker line. When I get to the other area that has a curtain wall, I want to make sure I offset again to match the exterior side of the mullions. To make this arched shape, I want this line extended. Now I can activate Start and Radius Arch, click at the upper end and then at the lower end. This tool tends to snap to a certain point that is not close enough to the mullions. To bypass snapping, I can just type SO on my keyboard to temporarily deactivate snapping. Now I have the footprint, and to extend the mass, I need to go to my 3D view, select the footprint, and click on Create Form. I want to make sure the height of the mass matches the top of the roof, and when I pan around, I can slightly see where the roof is. So I'm going to drag this top arrow down to where it snaps around where I saw the roof. I can now finish mass. Since that mass is hidden in my 3D view, but if I go to Visibility Graphics and look for mass, I can just check it on and hit OK. When my pointer hovers the mass, I can see it highlighted, and I will select it to make sure it looks right. At this point, I can go ahead and set up my energy settings. First line, called Mode, has 3 options, and I will use the default one that is called Use Conceptual Masses and Building Elements. That's why I had to model a mass that I called Conceptual Mass. Ground plane is level 1. This is a new construction. Analytical space resolution defines how Revit divides spaces into analytical surfaces. I will set this to 0.6 inches. Also, surface resolution will be 3 inches. Higher resolutions increases accuracy, lower resolution simplifies surfaces. Since I have a mass, I don't need a perimeter zone depth or division. Average vertical void height threshold is to differentiate the plenum spaces from the occupied spaces. I will leave this and horizontal chase area as they are. Now let's jump to advanced options. There is a bug here where first rows are grayed out, but I can quickly exit and then reopen energy settings. Now I can change percentage glazing to 40% and check glazing is shaded. I'm not going to touch the other few rows, but I'm going to jump to Export Complexity and set it to Complex with mullions and shading surfaces. For building envelope, I will select Identify Exterior Elements and set Building Service to Fan Coil System. Let's do Medium for Infiltration class. Building type is obviously not an office, so I can type Retail and select it. Let's assume this is a 24/7 operating store, and for this example I will use 4-pipe fan coil system. Also, I need to make a confession that I'm not an expert in HVAC systems. This is probably not something that it would be used for a retail store, but I'm setting it up like this just for demonstration purposes. For outdoor information, air per person will be set to 7.5, and I will also check air per area and set it to 0.12. Now this last part is very important because there are 3 levels of setting up the results of our design. The most basic one that is typically used in early design phases is conceptual types. Here if I click edit, I can just give Revit some basic information about the materials used. There are very few and general options that I can choose from. This is what Revit will use by default. Then I have schematic types. Here I have more options to define building materials. But this won't be used unless the override box is checked. So as an example, I will use override exterior windows and look for large double industrial, and then I will pick this one. Shading factor refers to external shading elements like trees, if any. I will set this to 0.15. The last option is detailed elements. When this is checked, Revit will override the settings and use the materials in the linked Revit file if the thermal properties are defined. This can be the most detailed option if the architect or designer of the building paid attention at the thermal properties of the materials used to model building components. So this gets as good as the extent of the details of linked Revit file. I'm not going to use this option since this is just an example. I'm done with energy settings. Now I need to define energy settings for each space of the building. For that, I need to go here in Schedules, and the default mechanical template comes with Space Outdoor Air Schedule. The only problem is that it is missing the name of the space, so if I click on the fields, I can look in the list for name and number in order to add them to the schedule, and I will also move space type lower under them. First space in this list is a break room. if I click on Building Type, I open this window where I can choose from a few space types available. There is no break room type, but there is a lounge, and there is a bunch of settings I can modify here. But for the scope of this example, I will just make sure I have a value for outdoor air per area. So I'm going to set a type for each space. Here the restroom air per area is set to 0 by default, so I will change this to 0.05. There is one last thing I need to do. Going back to my plan view, I noticed that there is no space names here because they are not tagged. To fix that, I can go to Annotate, select Tag All, look for spaces and then hit OK. Now when I go back to Analyze, I can select System Zones, which define the area served by a single HVAC system. To define these zones, I just need to draw a line that touches or includes the space intended to be serviced. First system zone will be for the sales area, so I will just draw a straight line inside this space. For the name, I will choose System Zone 0. Note that there is also a level offset for spaces, which changes the elevation. You want to make sure the system zone line is inside the volume of the space. Since this building is not too fancy, for my example 4 feet works just fine. Next I'm going to create another system zone for pharmacy area and I will name it System Zone 1. System Zone 2 will include all these rooms on the left side of the building. I will draw lines to include all of them and I want to make sure I avoid that hallway that is part of sales space because otherwise there is going to be a conflict. Now I'm going to right click and go down to browsers and select system browsers. This will open this side window right here that I can further set up and manage my HVAC systems and zones. From the drop down I will select Analytical Systems and here on the far right I have some tiny icons to set up my HVAC system. First I will select Add Water Loop. I'm going to use acronyms for chilled water loop and set the loop type to chilled water air cooled. I'm going to also add a hot water loop and set the type to hot water. Next step is to set a zone equipment and I will follow the naming sequence I used for system zones. Therefore this will be Zone Equipment 0. Equipment type will be 4-pipe fan coil, which is the same thing I set up for energy settings. 1 per space is fine because there is only one space, which is the retail space. Heating hot water loop will be the hot water loop we just created with the acronym HWL, and chill water will be CWL. I will leave draw ventilation checked and then hit apply. In my system browser, when I extend the water systems, I can see that they've been grouped under Zone Equipment 0. So I will duplicate it twice in order to get Zone Equipment 1 and 2. When I select System Zone 0, notice in the system browser that Unassigned is being highlighted. In the Properties panel, I can assign Zone Equipment 0 and then I will do the same for the other system zones. Note that once each system zone has been associated with a zone equipment, Unassigned disappeared from my system browser. For Zone Equipment 2, I want to change behavior to group spaces on equipment because it covers more than one space. Now we can finally go to Analyze and click on Create Energy Model. This might take a while to process depending on the size of the project, and how much detail we use to set up energy settings. When done, an analytical space 3D view was created, and now I can see all the spaces generated. This top space is the plenum space above retail, and it is unassigned along with other two plenum spaces. Each one of them needs to be moved to unconditioned so we can pull an accurate system analysis. But before that, I will open Visibility Graphics and go to Analytical Model categories. Here I will check pipe connections, surfaces, and system zones. Now I can see how Revit interprets surfaces in terms of energy analysis. For example, it knows that this surface is a roof, but for the purpose of my building, I want to make sure Revit sees the curtain walls as fixed windows, because sometimes, if not set right, Revit might think this is a wall and it is shaded, which will affect the overall analysis. In the Analyze tab, I will click on System Analysis. I need to have checked HVAC system loads and sizing, and now I can click Run Analysis. This will also take a while, and here in the bottom right, I can click on the tiny circle icon, which shows me that the system analysis runs in the background. Also, if I select a space, I can see the Properties panel under Energy Analysis that some parameters are being calculated. As soon as system analysis is done, in my project browser, down to Reports, I can find system loads and sizing that was generated by the system analysis. If the energy settings are set the right way, we can find a lot of information here that will help us size and design HVAC system. I can view information by zone equipment, for example, also by cooling and heating. I can also see design psychometrics, but for the purpose of this video, what I am mostly interested in is right here when I change the report style to detailed. I will click on Table of Content, and here again there is a lot of relevant information. For example, I can go see Component Sizing Summary, from where I can pull informations like the flows of hot and chilled water. Then I can also go to Equipment Summary, where I can find information about boilers, chillers, and pumps. All this can help me design my HVAC system for my building.